You know those stories that we think only happen in movies? Well, this one goes far beyond the cliché. Imagine finding out that the love of your life has a mistress. And even worse, this lover is paraplegic after an accident. Does it seem absurd? I would say it's unbelievable, but it happened to Ellie. And the most surprising? She did not react with hatred or revenge. It was not that explosion that society expects. On the contrary, Ellie did the unthinkable. She went to her mistress. He looked her in the eyes, talked, and from that conversation something was born that no one, absolutely no one, could have predicted. But calm down, don't think this is just another drama about betrayal. No, my friend, this story opens up something that few have the courage to face. What if the real enemy is not the other, but the ghosts inside us? What if, deep down, forgiveness is more revolutionary than revenge? Get ready, because what you're going to see here isn't just an emotionally stirring movie. It's a brutal, poetic, and real invitation to question everything you think about love, loyalty, guilt, and freedom. And I'll tell you more. At the end of this video, you'll wonder, what would I do in Ellie's place? Chapter 1. Just imagine, Ellie always believed that life as a couple was a safe field, where dreams were planted and watered every day. But then one day, almost without warning, she discovers that Noah, the man with whom she shared secrets, laughter, and even the fear of the dark, had another parallel story. And the most curious? This other story was called Summer. Oh, how the names seem to dance in this narrative, don't they? Ellie didn't just find a betrayal. She found an abyss, an echo of everything she thought was solid. And here, my friend, a deep reflection is in order. To what extent do we know who is by our side? It's like looking at a puzzle that we always believed to be complete, but suddenly pieces are missing. And you know the worst? Noah seemed to carry these pieces in his pocket, well hidden. Ellie's feeling when she discovered Summer was not only anger, nor pure and simple jealousy. It was a bittersweet mixture of disillusionment and curiosity. After all, who was Summer? Why did Noah choose her? And more, what united them beyond the superficiality of an adventure? Ellie felt a strange twinge. It wasn't just about losing Noah, but about losing the image she herself had built of love. And between us, who has never projected an ideal love, forgetting that the other is made of flesh, flaws, and hidden desires? It's like that old saying, the higher we climb, the greater the fall. And Ellie fell, yes, but she fell waking up. The most ironic thing is that Noah, so admired for his dedication, hid secrets under the impeccable routine. Ellie wondered, how many times did he go out saying, "I'll be right back," and was actually with Summer? These questions hammered his mind, like a restless drum. This is where the human heart shows its complexity. Even wounded, Ellie couldn't just hate him. Because love, my dear, doesn't turn off like a switch. How many people do you know who continued to love even after betrayal? And here's a real-life example. Lady Diana, betrayed, still maintained dignity and compassion for the man who hurt her. Ellie unknowingly walked along this same winding road. But the most intriguing thing about the story was the figure of Summer. Paraplegic after an accident, she was not the rival that Ellie imagined in soap operas. Summer had a physical fragility that contrasted with the quiet strength of her presence. This moved Ellie deeply because, how can you hate someone who already carries so much pain? Summer wasn't just the other. She was a broken woman, trying to rebuild herself amid the rubble of a body that no longer obeyed. And that, in a way, dismantled Ellie's weapons. Have you ever stopped to think that, sometimes, the enemy we imagine in the other is just a reflection of our own insecurity? The story, however, does not stop there. Ellie discovered that Summer and Noah weren't just lovers. There was a deeper emotional bond there, a kind of love that can't be explained in simple words. Noah saw in Summer something Ellie didn't understand, perhaps a safe haven for her own insecurities. And, ironically, Ellie began to wonder if Noah had also been just a supporting character in her own life. How many times do we believe we are protagonists, when, in fact, we are just another chapter in someone's story? And here's the lesson. Never underestimate the depth of relationships you don't witness. And as Ellie digested all of this, something inside her changed. She realized that betrayal wasn't the end. It was, in fact, an invitation to look beyond. Noah, Summer, herself. They were all pieces on a larger board, playing a game that no one explained the rules properly. And, believe me, life does this to us. When we think we have the cards in our hand, it shuffles everything again. Ellie began to realize that, perhaps, meeting Summer was more than an act of confrontation. It was a necessary step to understand Noah himself, and, above all, herself. And so, in the midst of pain, a new journey began to take shape, still without a name, but with a direction that not even she herself imagined. Chapter 2. When Ellie decided to visit Summer, no one understood. Not her closest friends, not her father, not that coworker who loves to get in where she is not called. But Ellie had a reason that even she couldn't quite explain. She needed to look into the eyes of the woman who, in some way, was also part of her story with Noah. And there, in the simple room where Summer lived, time seemed suspended. You know that feeling of entering a place and feeling that the air carries more than oxygen? Ellie felt it, because, at that moment, he realized that what separated them was much smaller than what united them. Two women, two worlds, a shared pain, as if Noah's love had been divided like a poorly planned inheritance. At first, the conversation between them was full of silences. Summer, sitting in her wheelchair, looked at Ellie with disconcerting calm. Ellie, in turn, looked at Summer trying to see her rival, but saw an exhausted, fragile, human woman. And it was in this look that the defenses began to fall. Summer said little, but enough to open rifts in Ellie's heart. He said Noah was kind, but also cowardly. That their relationship started without the intention of being something big, but ended up becoming a refuge. And Ellie, hearing all this, found herself faced with an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes, the other offers the other what we can never ask for. How many times have you felt that someone was truer outside of the relationship than inside it? It's hard, but real. Over time, silence gave way to confessions. Summer revealed that she was afraid. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of being just the woman in the wheelchair. Fear of losing the little that was left of control over her own life. Ellie, in turn, spoke of the fear of growing old alone, of having been changed, of never having been enough. And there, like two strangers who understand each other without needing to know each other, they created an invisible bridge. It's curious how pain can unite more than love, isn't it? There is a saying that goes, shared pain is half of pain. In that moment, Ellie and Summer discovered that they were somehow sharing a burden that neither of them had chosen to carry. Summer told things about Noah that Ellie would never have imagined. That he cried sometimes, that he had hidden anxiety crises, that he felt small in his own work, even wearing a tie and the smile of someone who dominates the world. Ellie was shocked, because, in her mind, Noah was that safe, stable, almost rock-like man. But here was the truth. Noah also had cracks. And it moved Ellie more than any betrayal. After all, how many times do we idealize someone without seeing their flaws? How many times do we put the other on a pedestal, only to suffer when he falls? This is a common mistake in many relationships. That's why I always say, admire, but don't idolize. With each new revelation, Ellie realized that the line between victim and culprit was much blurrier than it seemed. Summer wasn't just her lover. She was a lonely, hurt woman who had also believed in Noah's promises. And Noah was a man torn, caught between two versions of himself. Ellie began to see something that once seemed impossible. Summer was not her enemy. Perhaps, deep down, he was as much a victim as she was. And this realization brought a strange relief, but also a weight. Because when you understand the other, you can no longer hate them with the same intensity. You can't point the finger so hard anymore. And then, in that unlikely encounter, something unexpected emerged, a spark of empathy. Ellie felt compassion for Summer, and Summer, in turn, admired Ellie's courage to be there, face to face, without yelling, without accusing. It was as if, all of a sudden, they had understood that Noah wasn't the center of their story. He was just the thread that connected them. Ellie came out of that visit different, with a lighter heart, but also more full of questions. Because, deep down, that meeting opened doors to something bigger, the need to understand not only Noah or Summer, but herself. And so, the forced coexistence between wife and lover began to turn into something that no one could have predicted. Chapter 3. When Ellie returned home after that meeting, the image of Summer was still vivid in her mind. It was not just the figure of the woman in the wheelchair, but what was behind that imprisoned body. Summer, in the middle of an almost whispered conversation, had told something that Ellie never expected to hear. She had ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. That acronym, so short, carried immense weight. Ellie found herself searching the internet, reading medical articles, watching videos of people with the same diagnosis. And the more I read, the more I felt a tightness in my chest. Summer hadn't just lost the movement of her legs. She was losing, little by little, herself. And in the middle of this process, she still carried the stigma of being the lover, who would bear so much load. Summer, however, surprised. Despite the progression of the disease, there was a light in her that Ellie could not ignore. A kind of silent force, as if to say, I know what's happening to me, but I'm not going to let myself break down completely. And that moved Ellie deeply, because it showed a courage that she herself didn't know if she would have in Summer's place. How many times do we complain about small things, while others face giant battles without losing their smile? Summer became, in Ellie's eyes, not only the woman who divided Noah, but a warrior, a survivor. And here's a real example. Stephen Hawking, diagnosed with ALS, defied all predictions and became one of the greatest physicists in history. Summer, of course, was not Hawking, but she carried that same stubbornness of those who insist on existing, even when the body gives up. Ellie began to understand that Summer's story went far beyond Noah. It was the story of a woman who, even though she was physically limited, was looking for ways to stay active. Summer did physiotherapy at home, adapted simple activities, read books with impressive avidity. Ellie wondered how she did it, and Summer, in a moment of sincere laughter, replied, I don't have a choice. Either I fight, or I disappear. It echoed in Ellie's mind for days. And this is a valuable lesson that we forget. We don't always have control over circumstances, but we can always choose how to react. If you've ever felt paralyzed in the face of a problem, remember Summer, and ask yourself, what can I still do? Even so, there were moments, however, when Summer would break down. It wasn't always that unbeatable fortress. Sometimes she cried alone. Sometimes she screamed into the pillow. Sometimes she just looked out the window in silence. Ellie witnessed one of these scenes and, for the first time, felt that she could reach out without feeling pity, but respect. Summer didn't need compassion, but complicity. And there, in that moment of shared vulnerability, something changed between them. Ellie began to realize that pain, as different as it was, had a universal language, and that truly listening can be more powerful than offering solutions. This is true for all of us. The other does not always want advice. Sometimes, they just want company in silence. Summer's diagnosis brought a new layer to everything Ellie lived. Noah had chosen to love a woman who was losing control over her own body. And this wasn't just desire or escape. It was a surrender that Ellie was beginning to understand. It didn't justify the betrayal, but it explained something deeper. Noah saw in Summer a fragility that awakened in him an instinct for protection that he might never have felt with Ellie. And that hurt, because it was like discovering that love can manifest itself in ways that escape logic. Ellie spent nights thinking about it, reviewing conversations, remembering gestures. And the more I thought, the more I realized that loving someone imperfect also reveals our own imperfections. But there was something Ellie couldn't ignore. Summer, even with ALS, insisted on planning for the future. He talked about places he wanted to visit, movies he still dreamed of watching, projects he knew he might never do, but he liked to dream anyway. And that, in a way, was contagious to Ellie. Because, deep down, we all carry a little of this crazy hope, even knowing the limitations. Summer taught Ellie that the future is not guaranteed for anyone, but the desire to live makes every moment count. Ellie began to look at herself more generously. And there, between conversations about physiotherapy, music, and books, the relationship between the two was no longer marked only by Noah. Something new was beginning to be born, something that not even the two of them could name. Chapter 4. Over the days, Ellie began to feel that the pain of the betrayal went beyond the simple fact that Noah had been involved with Summer. It was as if her very existence was in check. Who was Ellie, after all, outside of that marriage? Who was that woman before she was Noah's wife? These questions echoed in her mind like a lingering bell calling in. Because, Let's face it, we spend so much time trying to be what is expected of us that sometimes we forget to be what we really are. Ellie found herself in front of a mirror that reflected not only her image, but all the choices she had made trying to please, to match, to fit in. And perhaps that was the most painful snap of all. Summer, in their candid and blunt conversations, poked at wounds that Ellie didn't even know she had. They spoke of love, but also of loss. They were talking about Noah, but also about themselves. Summer confessed that she often hated her own body, that she felt invisible on the streets, that she couldn't stand the looks of pity. Ellie heard that and thought, how many times had she also felt invisible, even walking on her own legs? Summer's pain was physical and visible. Ellie's was invisible, but no less real. And here lies a precious lesson. All pain deserves respect, regardless of the form it takes. Have you ever stopped to think how many people smile on the outside and scream on the inside? In the midst of these exchanges, Ellie began to reflect on the idea of forgiveness. Not that cute soap opera forgiveness, but the real, dirty, difficult forgiveness, which requires swallowing one's pride without losing one's dignity. She wondered, did forgiving Noah mean getting back together with him? Or was it just freeing oneself from the weight of hurt? Summer, with her aching wisdom, said something that stuck with her. To forgive is not to forget, Ellie. It is to stop carrying what does not belong to you. And this phrase became a mantra, because, many times, we carry guilt that is not even ours, pain that we should not even welcome. Ellie began to realize that forgiveness was more about herself than Noah. An act of self-love, a step to go light. But forgiving was not simple, because along with it came the doubt. Did Noah deserve it? Did Summer deserve it? Did she deserve it herself? These questions messed up Ellie's mind like tangled wires. And that's how it is, you know? Our emotional life does not follow an instruction manual. There is no step-by-step. There is no reset button. Ellie oscillated between anger and compassion, between hurt and tenderness. And, deep down, all of this was part of the process. It's like a wound. It hurts, it burns, but it heals. And scars don't erase what happened. It just shows that, one day, it hurt. Ellie understood, little by little, that the past could not be changed, but the present could be resignified. On a rainy afternoon, sitting side by side, Summer told something that deeply moved Ellie. Even if Noah comes back to you, Ellie, he'll never be the same man. That struck like lightning, because, deep down, Ellie knew. And that was precisely what hurt the most. It wasn't just about losing Noah, but about losing the version of him that she loved. And here's a truth that few dare to admit. Sometimes we don't miss the person, but what they represented. Ellie began to understand that she needed to rebuild her self-love before rebuilding any relationship. And this is a step that no one can skip, because those who abandon themselves trying to hold on to the other, sooner or later, fall apart. It was in this process of reflection that Ellie began to take small actions that seemed simple, but were giant. She went back to doing the things she loved before Noah: dance lessons, reading her favorite novels, walking alone listening to music. Summer, even though she was physically limited, encouraged every small victory of Ellie. And there, between two women who should hate each other, an unlikely support network was born. This shows something beautiful. Self-love is not built alone. We need people who remind us of who we are when we forget. Ellie understood that forgiveness wasn't a gift to Noah, it was a release to herself. And as he took his first steps out of the shadow of betrayal, a new light began to appear on the horizon. Chapter 5. Ellie knew that in order to move forward, she would need to face not only Noah or Summer, but also her own family. And oh, how it hurt. Ellie's father was a strict man, one of those who believed that a real woman holds her marriage at all costs. For years, Ellie tried to please him, trying to be the exemplary daughter, the devoted wife, the perfect woman. But now, with everything falling apart, she realized how much that paternal voice still echoed inside her. How many times have we heard the echoes of our creation, even without wanting to? Ellie began to understand that she wasn't just fighting Noah's betrayal, but the expectations she had carried since she was a child. And that, my friend, was an invisible but brutal battle. Conversations with his father were a minefield. He said phrases that pierced. He made mistakes, but every man makes mistakes. Are you going to quit a marriage because of a sick woman? His every word seemed to weigh a ton. Ellie felt anger, but also sadness. Because deep down I knew that he was speaking from his own wounds, from his own limitations. And here lies a hard lesson. Those who hurt us do not always want to hurt us. Sometimes, he repeats patterns without realizing it. How many families do you know that perpetuate toxic cycles, thinking they are protecting? Ellie realized that forgiving her father didn't mean agreeing with him. It was just accepting that he didn't have the tools to understand her grief. Family tensions did not stop at his father. There was the mother, always silent, looking at everything with a mixture of pity and fear. There was the aunt, always ready to give her opinion. And there were friends who, even if well-intentioned, gave shallow advice. Get another one soon, they said. You're still young, they insisted. But no one really understood what Ellie was experiencing. And that's where we learn something important. Not all advice is for us. Not every opinion deserves space in our mind. Ellie began to select what she heard, to filter the voices around her. And that, in itself, was already an act of freedom. If you've ever felt suffocated by other people's expectations, remember, you are the guardian of your own peace. Between one difficult conversation and another, Ellie began to realize that internal reconciliation was even more urgent than external reconciliation. There was no point in trying to fix the marriage without first fixing herself. There was no point in seeking approval from his father, mother, friends, if he continued to ignore his own voice. Summer, with her raw sincerity, would say, "You don't need Noah. You need you." And this phrase became a daily reminder. Because, deep down, it's easy to blame others. It's hard to look inside. Ellie began writing letters to herself, a simple but powerful practice. If you have never done it, try it. Write for your younger self, for the me of today, for the self that is yet to come. It is therapeutic. Ellie discovered a gentle mirror in the words. The visits to Summer continued, and each encounter revealed more about Ellie than about Summer herself. There were times when Ellie talked nonstop, venting everything she had never said to Noah or her family. Summer listened without judging, without interrupting, without trying to fix. It was a welcoming silence, a safe space. And that taught Ellie the value of true listening. How many times do we think that helping someone is talking, when in fact it is being silent? Summer showed, with her quiet presence, that empathy does not require words. Ellie began to apply this to other people, in conversations with colleagues, with friends, even with her own father. And little by little, the barriers were giving way. Reconciliation with one's own history did not come all at once. There were relapses, days of doubt, moments when Ellie thought about running back to Noah just to feel the acquaintance. But there was something different about her now, a spark of autonomy, a spark of self-love that grew slowly but steadily. Ellie realized that reconciliation wasn't about going back to the past, but about making peace with it. And that opened up a new space within her, a space where Noah, Summer, the father, the mother, all fit, but none else occupied the center. Ellie, finally, began to put herself in the main place of her own life. And with that, a new version of her emerged, more whole, more conscious, more self-possessed. Chapter 6. As the weeks passed, something curious happened. The friendship between Ellie and Summer blossomed in an almost unlikely way. Those who looked from the outside might not understand. After all, how could the wife and mistress share laughter, confidences, even inside jokes? But there, between sincere exchanges and respectful silences, a new relationship was built. It wasn't a friendship to get over Noah or to forget the betrayal. It was something deeper. Ellie and Summer began to realize that, deep down, neither of them really needed Noah to be complete. He was the link that united them, but not the reason that kept them connected. How many times in your life have you met someone in the midst of chaos, and from that encounter a new force was born? Summer, with her physical limitation, taught Ellie little lessons every day. He showed that courage was not the absence of fear, but to continue trembling. It showed that happiness was not a destination, but a daily choice. Ellie found herself admiring this woman who, even facing a cruel disease, was still willing to laugh, to dream, to open up. And that was contagious. Ellie began to give herself permission to dream again, thinking about travel, projects, even a new career. Summer said, laughing, "We're still going to hang out, you pushing my chair and me guiding you. And you know, sometimes, life really needs that kind of pretty craziness to make sense. The complicity between the two also brought moments of shared pain. There were days when Summer didn't want to talk, just be quiet, and Ellie understood. There were days when Ellie would break down, and Summer would just hold her hand. They didn't need big speeches. It was as if one understood the other without the need to explain everything. This connection, my friend, is rare. And if you ever meet someone like that, hold on to it with affection. Because in this world of superficial relationships, finding depth is a gift. Ellie realized that, of all the losses she had experienced, this friendship was an unexpected gain. And that made her question, do things really happen by chance? Over time, Ellie began to look at Noah with different eyes. No longer as the great lost love, nor as the unforgivable traitor, but as a flawed, humane man, full of contradictions. She didn't forget what he did, but she didn't feel the same pain when she remembered. Summer helped Ellie see that Noah was not a prize to be fought for, nor a trophy of victory or defeat. It was just Noah, a man with qualities and defects, capable of loving, making mistakes, caring, and also hurting. Ellie realized that by ceasing to idealize him, she freed herself. And here's a powerful piece of advice. The less you idealize someone, the less they have the power to destroy you. Ellie learned this the hardest, but also the most transformative. On a sunny afternoon, sitting in the garden of the hospital where Summer was undergoing physical therapy, Ellie and Summer talked about the future. Summer said she wasn't afraid of death, but she was afraid that she hadn't lived all she could. Ellie, hearing that, felt a lump in her throat. Because, for the first time, she herself admitted that she had lived halfway for years. That left dreams shelved, desires stifled. Summer looked at her, smiled, and said, "Don't wait any longer, Ellie." And that sentence was recorded. Maybe you need to hear this too. Don't wait any longer. Life does not deliver guarantees. Only the now is in your hand. And so, between light and deep conversations, between tears and laughter, Ellie and Summer built something rare, a friendship that healed, that did not erase the past, but transformed pain into learning, that he did not deny the wounds, but showed that they did not need to define the future. Ellie felt that, alongside Summer, she was finally learning to be Ellie again. And, deep down, this was the greatest victory. Because loving yourself, after losing yourself, is an act of courage. And there, sitting under the sun, they knew that their story was far from over. A new page was ready to be written, even if they didn't yet know what the next chapter would be. Chapter 7. The day of the final confrontation arrived without warning, like those storms that no one foresees, but deep down I already expected. Ellie woke up with an eerie clarity, as if something inside her had finally lined up. She decided to call Noah and ask him to meet her at the same cafe where, years ago, he had proposed. There was a poetic irony to it, and Ellie liked ironies. When Noah arrived, hesitantly, Ellie looked him in the eyes with a calmness that surprised them both. There was no more anger, no more pent-up tears. There was only the need to say everything, to put the cards on the table, without fear of the consequences. And that's what she did. Ellie began by telling her about Summer. He told how he met her, how he went to her house, how he heard her story without interruptions. He told of the conversations, the confidences, the pain, and the strength of Summer. Noah listened to her in silence, with a mixture of guilt and astonishment on his face. When Ellie revealed that she had become friends with Summer, he arched his eyebrows, as if he didn't know if it was a joke or a tease. But Ellie continued, steadfast. He said that his friendship with Summer had shown things that neither he nor their marriage had ever been able to reveal. And that, as strange as it seemed, Summer had been the bridge that reconnected her with herself. Noah tried to justify himself, as expected. He said he never meant to hurt, that everything got out of hand, that Summer needed him, that he himself was lost. Ellie listened, but this time without breaking inside, because something had changed. She no longer needed his explanations to move on. And this, my friend, is one of the greatest freedoms that someone can conquer, that of not depending on the narrative of others to free themselves. Ellie looked at Noah with compassion, but also with a certain detachment. It was as if, there, she finally saw Noah as a human being, not as the villain or hero of her story. Just Noah. Ellie spoke of forgiveness. He said he forgave him, yes, but not to return, nor to forget. I forgave because I didn't want to carry that weight anymore. Because the hurt was an anchor, and she was ready to sail again. Noah didn't seem to fully understand, but Ellie knew that some things don't need to be understood to be real. And here's a truth worth gold. Forgiveness is more for the one who forgives than for the one who is forgiven. Ellie chose to go light, and that choice, at that moment, was more powerful than any forced reconciliation. As they talked, Noah asked if there was any chance they could start over. Ellie smiled, a wistful but serene smile. He said he didn't know. That may be one day. That may be never. Because now she had other priorities, other dreams, other possibilities. And that, above all, she had a new friendship which she did not want to lose. Noah didn't answer. He just lowered his head in a gesture of silent acceptance. And in that moment, Ellie realized the pain still existed, but it was no longer a prison. It was just part of the landscape, like a scar that tells a story without needing to be opened again. When Ellie left that cafe, she felt the wind hit her face in a different way. She was no longer the betrayed woman, not just Noah's wife. Neither did Summer's friend. It was Ellie, whole, complex, nuanced. And that was enough. As he walked down the sidewalk, he looked up at the sky and thought of Summer. He smiled as he remembered her words. "Don't wait any longer, Ellie." And there, in the middle of the street, Ellie learned that her story with Noah and Summer had come to an end. But her story with herself, this one was just beginning. And to conclude, now I ask you, how many times have you found yourself stuck in a pain that you didn't choose, but kept carrying? How many times have you believed that forgiving was humbling yourself, when in fact it was the key to going light? The story of Ellie, Noah, and Summer shows us that, as painful as it is, no one needs to live imprisoned by the mistakes of others. There is life beyond disappointment. There is hope after the fall. There is reconstruction after loss. But tell me, what about you? Are you really living or just surviving in the midst of emotional rubble? What are you waiting for to put yourself at the center of your own life? I want to hear your answer here in the comments. Write to me. What difficult decision do you need to make today to finally free yourself? And what would be the first step that is already within your reach? If this story moved you, don't keep it just for yourself, no. Share it with anyone who needs to hear it today. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications. Because here, we don't just deliver stories. We deliver reflections that transform. And you won't want to miss the next chapters of this journey.